Welcome to Strip Cover, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford.
And I'm Dalton Gentry.
And we are here for part 3 of a 6-part series as we trudge along through Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce.
Trudge is the correct word on that. Chapter 3 of Portrait of the Artist. I've also realized as I'm writing about this and texting about this, I can't spell portrait. I always leave out an R.
Do you?
I always text out the word portrait, and I'm like, shit.
Or portate?
No, it's always portrait. It's the first R that tricks me.
It's the St. Joe coming out. The portrait.
The portrait.
The portrait of the artist.
The portrait. Well, I don't know where we're going from here. Let me break down this chapter a little bit. I feel this chapter was a little easier to navigate, for sure.
That's because it was all about one thing.
Which is better. Thank you, James Joyce.
It was all about the fear of hell.
Well, a little fire and brimstone does you some good. So Stephen has continued to live a life of ill repute and now openly questions God, the idea of sin. He's having all these big thoughts about, questioning the commandments, things like that. And then we follow him to a 3-day church retreat, the good old church camp, where the concept of hell is delivered in fire and brimstone passion relentlessly, and it breaks him to the point where he eventually has to go seek out a priest outside of his normal church because he doesn't feel comfortable confessing there, and confesses his sins, and Stephen is once more pure. Pure of heart, pure of mind.
Is he though?
Yes, he is. He's a reformed man, Adrian.
Is he though?
He's cured. He's found God.
How many times when you were, what does he say, 16? How many times when you were 16 did you try to stop masturbating?
Oh, okay. Okay, well, I've also tried to stop smoking. We see how that went for me. So I thought you were going to break into one of my points here. I'm like, you son of a bitch, we have to at least stretch this out for 20 minutes. So I felt better about this one because this chapter is a little easier to follow along. We're not bouncing all over the place like we have been previously. But you are right. A lot of fire and brimstone with this. Delivered by arguably the one... You want me to touch that book?
Hand off the table, you're shaking the camera.
I'm sorry. Delivered by arguably one of the few people in Stephen's life who tried to do him good. This was the guy who, when his glasses were broken, he said, hey, it's all right. It's fine. So, yeah. That's the one guy coming in hard on you. It's like your coach in football practice when he sits you down. He's like, listen, we got to fix some things. So Stephen's feeling directly attacked by this, and that puts the fear of God into him, honestly.
Why does he feel directly attacked?
It's the life he's been living. He's been sleeping with these prostitutes. He's been doing his own thing. He's turned a blind eye towards God, and he's questioning it. So now the guilt is setting in.
Yeah, we're left to assume that between where our last chapter ended and this chapter begins, that he's really, really, really partaken in some sin.
He's been living it up.
He's been enjoying himself.
Having himself a time. Which, it's part of the growing up process. You gotta test your boundaries. Not necessarily prostitutes, but hey, different time. To each his own.
But, okay, so... At the end of the last chapter, we get him just sort of wandering into this, right?
Okay.
Just sort of stumbling upon prostitutes.
Okay.
At the beginning of this chapter, we start with this. The swift December dusk had come tumbling clownishly after its dull day, and, as he stared through the dull square of the window of the schoolroom, he felt his belly crave for its food. He hoped that there would be stew for dinner, turnips and carrots, and bruised potatoes and fat mutton pieces to be ladled out in thick peppered, flour-fattened sauce. Stuff it into you, his belly counseled him. It would be a gloomy, secret night. After early nightfall, the yellowish lamps would light up here and there in the squalid quarter of the brothels. He would follow a devious course up and down the streets, circling, always nearer and nearer in a tremor of fear and joy, until his feet led him suddenly round a dark corner. The whores would be just coming out of their houses, making ready for the night, yawning lazily after their sleep and settling the hairpins in their clusters of hair. He would pass by them, calmly waiting for a sudden movement of his own will, or a sudden call to his sin-loving soul from their soft, perfumed flesh. Yet as he prowled in quest of that call, his senses stultified only by his desire, would note keenly all that wounded or shamed them. His eyes, a ring of porter froth on a clothless table, or a photograph of two soldiers standing at attention, or a gaudy playbill. His ears, the dawdling jargon of a greeting. Hello, birdie. Any good in your mind? This is something that we have time and again in this novel, and it is Joyce tempting us, lulling us to sleep with one thing, and then flipping it on us and showing us how it is the same thing as another thing.
Okay.
We start this very much saying, God, I'm hungry. I'm so hungry, I just want a nice meal. God, I'm horny. I'm so horny, I just want a nice prostitute. And it's the same thing. It's the same desire. We both are inescapable. Both are inescapable to this character. And we even... So, one of the small things that's easy to overlook there is just how vivid this picture of basically the red light district.
Okay.
Just how vivid this picture is. Okay. Right? He's talking about... they would be coming out of their houses, making ready for the night, yawning lazily after their sleep, and settling the hairpins in their clusters of hair. He knows exactly what this looks like. And even down to the fact where he knows the different times of the night.
Okay.
Like, he knows if you go early to the restaurant, you get lunch. If you go late, you get dinner, right? If I asked you, Olive Garden, what time do they stop serving lunch and start serving dinner?
3 p.m.
Oh, you know that. I have no idea. I have no idea when these things happen, Dalton. I was hoping you didn't know that, but...
It's like the guy, you go to the liquor store to get a bottle of gin at 11 p.m., that's fine. But I went to the liquor store at 9 a.m. when they opened to get a bottle of gin is a different fucking story.
Right.
Because I know they open at 9 a.m.
Well, so gin, maybe not. Maybe you're preparing for a party. But the minute you grab something out of the cooler...
Yep.
At 9 a.m., they know where it's going.
Personally, I like to think anybody who's buying gin at 9 a.m. knows where they're going. It's not a party.
Probably, yeah.
So,
with gin.
Are you still continuing with that?
Well, no. I think that knowing the different... So, you know that Olive Garden stops serving lunch at 3 and starts serving dinner.
I fucking love breadsticks.
Right. What is it that Stephen loves?
Breadsticks.
Yeah. So...
This went downhill
real fast.
So, let's talk about food. Because food is not there just to tempt us. Food is not just thrown in there. James Joyce is too crafty of a writer to do something like that. When food is in literature, food is there for a reason. We both picked up a book at one point in time. I don't know if you've ever read your way through it, but we got How to Read Literature Like a Professor. Great chapter on this.
I have not read it.
It's actually a good read. I enjoyed it. And in the end, there's actually further reading. They're like, you should read these. These are good canons. And James Joyce, Portrait of the Artist, is actually listed in the master class.
Oh.
Don't fuck with that until you're ready.
Yeah.
Food. Food is always symbolic. Food is there for a reason. The beginning of the novel, beginning of the chapter, when Stephen's living life up, enjoying himself, food's a great thing. We get beautiful imagery. The food's going to be wonderful. Bruised potato, thick cuts of mutton, wonderful stew.
And what's the thing about stew?
What is the thing about stew?
Everything you want's in there.
Everything you want's in there.
You want it, throw it in.
Why not?
What doesn't go in stew? What doesn't go?
A little bit of spice.
Yeah.
Everything's nice. Moving forward, we get food brought back in this chapter when he's at the church retreat. And the food is making him ill. He feels the food is rotting him from within. The food has no taste. That fear of God is so far into him at this point that even the pleasures of life are ruined.
Well, but so it's very representative. At the beginning, that food is his indulgence.
It is
Anything you want with a prostitute goes. It's stew. At the end, that food is rotting him from the inside. It is the sin that is rotting him from the inside.
But it's not the end. Because at the end of the chapter, we get food mentioned one more time.
Okay.
Food is mentioned again in a favorable light when he's talking about a spread of food. He's doing some groceries were spread out, and food's a good thing again. Because the fear of God is now gone, because he's a saved man. Joyce is arguing here that it doesn't matter what path you take. You want to believe in God, you don't want to believe in God, it's fine. But it's the fear of God that'll kill you. It's the fear of God that'll drive the artist down. It will ruin him. Once that fear is removed, whether with carnal pleasure at the beginning, or with the concept of he is forgiven and he has a fresh start, things are okay again. You can indulge again, Stephen. Enjoy yourself. It's only the fear of God that'll strike you down.
There's a bit there I want to talk about. So basically, 20 pages of this is just Joyce trolling you.
Okay.
He's explaining these tortures of the damned, right?
In beautiful imagery and beautiful fashion. It's well described.
And it's so thorough that at some point you have to stop and say, wait a minute, am I still reading about hell?
Okay.
Are we still doing this?
Okay.
So is it the promise of heaven or the threat of hell that makes us behave?
Oh, it's always the threat of hell.
Right. Why is that?
It's the fear of God. I mean, you'd rather... I'm trying to think of a good way I want to put it.
I've got an argument. So did you know that in the Jewish religion, from which Christianity comes, hell is not a thing?
True.
There is Gehenna, in which there might be much gnashing of teeth, but we have no real concept that it is eternal. We think that so as far as I understand the Jewish religion, in Gehenna you just pay your atonement, and in the time when all are raised, everyone's going to be there.
Okay.
Right? The Jewish religion was founded in the Bronze Age, during which life sucked. Life was miserable. So all you needed in order to behave was the promise that the afterlife would be better.
Okay.
After this, with Jesus Christ meek and mild, comes the promise of hell, eternal. When does Jesus come around?
When does Jesus come around?
There's a lot of civilizations around the year 0, aren't there?
Okay.
A
lot more options.
Rome was really a thing.
Booming.
Carnal desires everywhere, weren't there?
Okay.
So life, pretty enjoyable at the time, huh? You could, don't get me wrong, it wasn't today. You didn't have air conditioning and all of the amenities that we have today, but things were going all right. Like, you could live a decent little life with strong civilization going on all around you. At that point, you need a little bit of a negative reinforcement, don't you? You got to have the threat of hell.
Okay.
That's what it takes later. That's what it takes today to keep people in line, is the threat of hell, not the promise of heaven.
You don't wake up every day and go to your 9 to 5 expecting a better life. You wake up every day and go to the 9 to 5 because you don't want to fucking starve.
Yeah. Okay.
Took me a second to think of that. I'm going with it.
Go with it.
That's the analogy for heaven and hell. It's not the good thing that you're working for. You're working to get away from the bad thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to starve, so I'm going to go to work. I don't want to go to hell. I better believe in Christ. It's not that I'm going to continue to go to work because, eventually if I do this, it's going to be a nice life. I'll retire and I'll enjoy it. Fuck no, I'm going to work till I'm 95.
Yeah.
It's all about the fear of what's coming if you don't. The consequence. The fear of consequence. And consequence is a strong thing throughout this. Stephen feels the guilt of sin. The idea of, what he's done in his past may finally catch up with him. That's that fire and brimstone attitude we keep talking about. And it's not until he gets his conscience cleared, by atoning for this in this case, that he feels right again. It's something that's quite literally, it's eating him away from the inside. So I think there's a lot going on here. And again, this idea of sin keeps me coming up. It seems to be a huge reoccurring theme in this novel so far. And I don't know, man. I kind of can get behind the fire and brimstone of this. I think it's well executed. I think the descriptions of hell are wonderful. It's well written.
Well,
maybe overdone.
I will say that it's hilarious.
Okay.
It's hilarious because James Joyce knows exactly what he's doing, right? He's not sitting you down and talking about the imagery behind hell for 20 pages just to do it. He's doing it because you, as the reader, get fed up as well. He's doing it because you, as the reader, have given in. Once Stephen visits that prostitute the first time, how is that scene described? It is not described in detail.
No.
He makes you do the work there, right?
Which is very typical of writing good literature.
He makes you do the work, the heavy lifting. He makes you envision the encounter with that prostitute. He is luring you into that mental part of the sin. And in the Christian religion, to kill someone in your mind is just the same as pulling the trigger, right? So the sin can happen whether the sin happens or not. Lust is just as bad a sin as rape, right?
Fair argument.
In fact, lust is not just one of the deadly sins. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods, his mule, or his wife, right? That's against lust. Is one of the 10 commandments against rape?
It's not.
It's not in there. So technically, I mean, it's more of a sin to want something in that way. So when we start getting into the nuance of those things, you picturing it is just as bad as Stephen having done it.
Okay.
So he lures us in, makes us commit the sin, and then he spends 20 pages berating us, right? We're right there with Stephen because we've done half the work of this.
Okay. I think it's interesting as well. We've talked a little bit on this channel, like our journey into atheism and like when that came to be. I think Joyce captures this beautifully because we get the idea of Stephen's opening up to new things. He's experiencing new things that are completely outside of his world. That very first hint of atheism you had when you were growing up. But then comes that fucking fear of God of, what if I'm wrong?
Where he claps back very hard.
You clap back hard. You catch yourself. You're like, oh shit hit the fan. I hope to God everything's okay. You find yourself doing those little minute prayers and everything, just those little thoughts in your head, the fleeting thoughts that are silly. But it's that fear that turns you back. And I think that's captured beautifully in this. Because we see Stephen experiencing things for the first time. We see him opening his world up. But when that fear's brought back into him, boy, does he crumble. Boy, does he crumble. Which I think is a natural progression for someone who's leaving a Christian faith, moving in towards atheism. So I think it's well done there. But the real question is here, throughout this entire chapter, how is this going to shape and change the artist?
Yes. So we get, like you said, a little bit of a hint in that art seems to come from indulgence.
Okay.
Right? We get when Stephen's feeling good about himself, he's able to create. Is that fair to say? We get during the high times that he's winning these awards and things.
Okay.
But we don't ever really get it told to us.
Okay. I think that could be fair. It could even be argued that when he's turned from God, at least he's creating experiences. He's also creating opportunity. He's starting to question things. There was a good bit where he was questioning the breaking of the commandments and how if he could break all of them in one. These are thoughts that only come forward once we've turned from God. Once we've had that option for a little bit of free thinking. And it has opened him up as an artist. It has made him a more open and receptive to the world around him. So yeah, I think it is changing the artist. It is shaping the artist. It's not a fair argument to say you cannot be a successful artist with God in your life.
No, there are Christian artists for
There are Christian artists for thousands of years. But I think...
Well, just a couple anyway.
It's definitely shaping Stephen. It is changing him. And we are getting, at this point, the first inklings of the developing artist. The man questioning things, changing his ways. And I would like to hope... Have you read Portrait before? Have we discussed that?
So I read this in a class, wink, wink, in that my eyes glazed over every word in the book, but I took almost nothing from it. So from this point on, I have no idea what happens.
Okay.
This was sort of the last thing that I remembered-ish about the book. Does that make any sense?
I would like to think and like to hope at this point we're going to see more of the development of the artist, where the artist is coming into play with this. Because we've definitely seen the development of Stephen the man from a boy. We've seen the argument of Stephen's religious point of view, which are still kind of skewed. We don't know which way he's going to turn, but we've seen both ends of the spectrum. It's time to start delivering on the artist now, to see where that's coming into play. At least that's what I hope. I'd like to imagine Joyce does well. I mean, for Christ's sake, this is considered one of the best books ever written.
It's called Portrait of the Artist.
That's delivered. Yeah. Let's see it. So that's what I've definitely got for this. I'm kind of looking forward to going a little bit forward with this. I felt better about this chapter. I did. I'm finally starting to sink in with it a little bit.
This, for me, was the worst chapter yet.
God damn it.
Just because it was just 80% of this chapter was, hey, you know, in hell you get your eyes poked out Hey, you know in hell is it really hot? Hey, you know when all your family comes over and you got that weird uncle that no one really likes talking to? Hell's just that guy all around you.
Always. I've never actually been to like a fire and brimstone experience. Like the church that I had to go to when I was a little kid, really easygoing. I think it'd be an interesting experience to just witness it because like it really is. It's someone standing up there and screaming at you and threatening you.
I've been there.
Have you?
Yeah, I've been there.
Okay.
It is. So the one thing that, and this is sort of off topic, I know, but the one thing that really post-religion confuses me about Christianity is this predilection towards the end of the world, the end times. And so as a child, that was always something that really frightened me. That was the fear of God for me, was the end times. One of the churches I went to was just infatuated with this was the end times.
Okay.
We're about to see it. It's a coming.
Just right around the corner.
Yeah, and it's just a strange, the scatological yearning for the end of everything. I don't understand it, but I sort of do on a primal level. I think that's in all of us, right? You have that. It's like that. The chess game. We're never going to finish, and you know you're never going to finish, but you've got to sit there. At some point, you get the urge to just wipe everything off the table.
It's hard to imagine a world without yourself in it.
Okay.
Therefore, you always have that immediate argument. Well, obviously the end times is coming because there can't be a world without me in it.
Okay.
It's just like the idea of death. If there is no heaven, you're just gone. Thought is gone. So when you die, there's nothing.
Yeah.
That's a very hard concept to get into your brain.
Yeah.
You have to trick yourself almost into believing something like that.
But once you do, it's almost impossible to accept it any other way, right? Like, so one of the first very big battles with religion I had that sort of weighs into the sort of ambiance of this text was that I remember being, from the scene in my mind where we were, the house I lived, I must have been 4 years old.
Okay.
I remember breaking down and crying to the point where they didn't know what to do with me because the idea of eternity didn't make any sense to me. Because what happens when I'm done with it? Right? And that was the first break I had with religion, was the fact that I don't think I want to do this for everything, man. I didn't vote to be here. Now I got to be here for good.
I mean, like go vacation in hell for a couple weeks just to spice things up a little bit?
Just to figure it out. Like, at some point, I will have talked to everyone in heaven.
Yeah, like, I've been to Tampa. It's the same thing. It's fine.
Like, at some point, this has got to end, right?
So I think there's a lot of big things going on with Stephen. I think we're at a point for this character right now where this is the decision point. This is where he's seen both ends of that spectrum. There was the notion that they've been inkling him towards the priesthood. This is his choice. This is where he has to either find his balance or go one end to the other.
Well, in talking about going from one end to the other, we have both ends here, don't we? We have the young lady that he loved, but never got to be with.
Okay.
So that love is still pure.
It is.
That love is still untainted. That love is still virginal. Then we have his other life, where he's seeing prostitutes in the nighttime. Right? So we have both those visions of a woman from the Bible, right? The Virgin Mary and the other Mary.
Okay.
Right? So where are we going there?
I don't know. Like I said, I think we are at a crossroads here for Stephen.
And we've got the big question. We've got the big question with that. So had he ended up with the love of his life, right? You could always go and experience the prostitute, couldn't you?
Okay.
But once you start with the prostitute, can you ever go back?
Nope.
What do you mean, no?
Yep.
Why not?
Sorry, I'm trying to pay attention to chapters here where we are with this. No, I'm just telling you out completely.
I'm just saying, if no matter what you say, you have to answer why. And I think that we've got the character here very much stuck in that question.
Okay.
He seems to be wondering if I've already done this. Have I ruined it all forever?
Okay.
What are you looking at?
I'm looking at our chapters here. Okay. I feel better. I was looking at the chapters here, and I actually was looking at where the maps are. The maps are listed because there's...
Maps?
Yeah, they've got maps there. I have maps. Do you have maps?
I don't have maps.
I think I even dog-eared.
You have maps?
Yeah, there's a dog-ear on chapter 5 that I made because I have a map.
This isn't fantasy.
But anyway, 225 pages here. Because if we look at the art of the maps, I'm like, oh, is chapter 5 really 181 pages? Like that's the end? We're almost done with this? But we're getting close to halfway through this. We're actually a little more than halfway through.
Yeah.
We're at that crosswire, right?
So
it's time.
That's also another small point. This chapter is essentially spent in hell.
Okay.
That's all we're reading about, isn't it?
It is hell for him.
So,
and he's feeling the
all
effects
we're reading about, this chapter is basically set in hell.
Okay.
Right?
That's fair.
Is this the low point of the story?
I feel like this is the culmination of the story.
It'd be right in the middle there.
Right in the middle. I mean, this is it. This is the breaking point.
2 before, 2 after.
This is where we see where he goes after. I'm excited for it. It's growing on me like a fucking fungus.
Joyce does that. Don't you find yourself appreciating the first 2 chapters better now that you don't have to read them?
Let's not talk about those first 2 chapters.
I think that this is one of those experiences where I'm glad we're doing a read-along for this, because it is very much one of those texts that I think is easier to take in with a read-along, easier to take in when you're breaking it down, easier to take in when you've got someone with which to speak about the ideas.
If we would have tried to do this as a standalone review as we used to do way back when, no way, man. No fucking way.
No.
Anyway, that's all I've got for Portrait. Do you have anything else you really want to touch on here?
No, that's okay.
We'll end us out.
So this has been part 3 of a 6-part journey through Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. We hope to see you here for the next episode, which will be Chapter 4. Then a week after that, we will have Chapter 5, and then finally the review. Leave a like if you like this sort of thing. We're trying to get into more of these read-alongs here on the channel. And subscribe if you have not, but you are looking forward to this. And if you would like to help us create more content here on Strip Cover Lit, there is a link, as always, to our Patreon to be found in the description below. Textual base we've got.
Ooh.
Ew.
That's better.
Is it?
I hope.
There's more of you.
Is there?
I'm just kidding.